Okay, picture this. It's June 1944. D-Day was a success, but just days later, the entire Allied invasion of Normandy is grinding to a halt. And the reason wasn't what you'd expect. The solution wouldn't come from some high-ranking general, but from a sergeant, a mechanic with no fancy engineering degree, who had a crazy idea that was about to change the whole course of the war. This is a story that sounds like it was ripped straight out of a Hollywood script. It's all about a single, simple invention, literally built from battlefield scrap metal, that had this massive, war-altering impact. So let's break down exactly how it all happened. So just days after the beach landings, the Allied armies were completely bogged down. They were supposed to be miles inland, but instead they were advancing maybe a few hundred yards a day. And the problem wasn't some huge German counterattack or a ton of artillery. It was the landscape itself, an ancient, deadly obstacle. Now, when you hear the word hedgerow, don't picture the little green bushes in a suburban backyard. The hedgerows in Normandy were something else entirely. We're talking about centuries-old barriers, these massive 15-foot-tall walls of compacted earth, stone, and tangled roots, so thick they were basically natural fortresses, and they crisscrossed the entire region like a deadly maze. For the American tank crews, this landscape became a graveyard, and the process was just brutally simple and repetitive. A Sherman tank would try to climb one of these hedgerows. As it did, its thin belly armor would tilt up, completely exposed, and waiting on the other side, German soldiers with anti-tank weapons. One shot, and the tank would just erupt in flames. It was happening over and over and over again. But right in the middle of this nightmare, one guy saw the problem differently. Sergeant Curtis Cullen. He wasn't an engineer, he wasn't a West Point officer, he was a mechanic from New Jersey who fixed cars before the war. But he understood machines, he understood leverage and force, and he was about to apply that knowledge in a way that was, well, nothing short of brilliant. Cullen's big insight, and you can see it perfectly here, was that everyone was trying to go over the obstacle. He realized the problem wasn't the hedgerow itself, it was the approach. He thought, what if we could go through it? If a tank could just plow straight through at ground level, its thick frontal armor would stay pointed at the enemy, and that vulnerable belly would never get exposed. Of course, an idea like that, well, not everyone was on board. You can just imagine his own crewmates joking about him, constantly sketching in his notebook. A lot of very smart, very high-ranking people had failed to solve this problem. What made this one sergeant think he could do any better? He was the classic underdog. So Cullen takes his seemingly insane idea to his commanding officer, Captain Morrison. He pitches this plan to weld giant steel prongs to the front of a tank, basically turning it into a giant battering ram that could just rip through all that earth and roots. You got to admit, it was an audacious, completely untested plan in the middle of a war zone. And you know what? Captain Morrison made a call that would literally change the campaign. He gave Cullen 48 hours to make it happen. And it was this incredible race against time. Cullen and his crew started scavenging steel from the Czech hedgehog obstacles the Germans had put on the beaches to stop them. They worked all through the night with welding torches, and by dawn on that second day, their prototype was ready to go. The reaction from the other soldiers was a mix of awe and total ridicule. The modified Sherman, with these 4 massive steel tusks welded to its front, looked completely bizarre. The nickname they came up with, a pig trying to mate with a porcupine, that perfectly captures how strange this thing must have looked. And now came the moment of truth. Cullen had built his mad contraption, but would it be hailed as a work of genius or just dismissed as a suicidal failure? It was time for the first test. And it worked. It worked perfectly. The tank charged the hedgerow, the prongs dug in, and with this thunderous crash of snapping roots and exploding earth, it just burst right through to the other side. A clean breach. Its belly armor was never exposed for a second. The soldiers who were watching just erupted in cheers. But a controlled test is one thing. The invention, which they were now calling the rhinoceros, had to prove itself in the one place that actually mattered, under enemy fire. So the target was a German strongpoint that had bled American forces for 3 agonizing days. And what was waiting there? Oh, just the ultimate challenge, a German Panther tank, a far superior machine, lying in ambush. Under the old tactics, this was a death sentence. But this is where the new tactic changed everything. Instead of backing off or calling for artillery, Cullen gave the order to charge. The whole point of his invention was to change the rules of the game, to use speed and surprise as a weapon. The rhinoceros smashed through the hedgerow, bursting out right in front of the panther. Its crew was still trying to turn their turret to figure out what was happening, but the Sherman's gunner fired first, disabling the enemy tank. This thing wasn't just a tool, it was a tactical revolution. Well, you can bet that news of this success didn't just walk up the chain of command, it sprinted. The impact was immediate and it was decisive. The mad mechanic's little idea was about to go very, very big. And just look at the scale of the response here. High Command didn't just approve the idea, they ordered 5,000 Cullen hedgerow cutters to be made, like immediately. They set up assembly lines right there in the fields of Normandy, and Sergeant Cullen himself was put in charge of training the crews. And the significance of this, you just can't overstate it. General Omar Bradley, one of the top Allied commanders in Europe, personally came down to visit Cullen just to thank him. He didn't see a lowly sergeant. He saw the man whose simple, brilliant idea had just gotten his entire army moving again. And as the war went on, the story gets even cooler. Soldiers started finding all sorts of new uses for these cutters. They became this all-purpose battlefield tool. They were smashing through walls in city fighting, clearing roadblocks during the Battle of the Bulge, and even using them to get traction on muddy riverbanks. The innovation just kept evolving. But success brought new problems. The Allied advance was now moving so fast that supply lines were struggling to keep up. And Cullen himself wrestled with the moral weight of his invention. He was being decorated for finding a more efficient way to win battles. And that's a really complex burden for a guy who just wanted to solve a problem. And here it is. This is the ultimate sign of success. By 1945, the cutter was so common, so standard, that the problem it was designed to solve was completely forgotten. New tankers arriving in Europe couldn't even imagine the death trap the hedgerows used to be. Cullen didn't just solve the problem. He made the problem disappear from memory. Years later, Cullen reflected on all the fame. He said he wasn't special. The special part, he said, was that the army, from his captain all the way up to the top generals, was willing to listen to a crazy idea from a sergeant. The real lesson wasn't about his genius, but about what can happen when you actually empower people to solve problems. Cullen's story is such a powerful reminder that the biggest breakthroughs don't always come from the experts in the boardroom. And it leaves us with a really critical question. What brilliant, simple solutions are right in front of us today, just waiting for someone to listen?